Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old Fourth Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Happy weekend to you. Thank you for listening, whether it's on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com, or via podcast. Let's start with a story from ESPN. Yes, ESPN, and you may not even think that this has Atlanta or Georgia ties, but I promise you it does. Roll the tape.
To hockey now, and the Arizona Coyotes are deserting the desert for Salt Lake City. For nearly 3 decades, the team has been a franchise favorite in that Phoenix area, but has had to endure multiple ownership groups, arena changes, even bankruptcy in Arizona. Now the team is relocating to Utah, and this afternoon, the NHL governors are expected to approve the sale of the team to Ryan Smith, who also owns the Utah Jazz. Well, last night, the team raised their stick, said goodbye to their Arizona fans with a win over Edmonton before a capacity crowd of 4,600 at Arizona State. You can see it was an emotional goodbye for those Coyote fans who saw this franchise come to town back in 1996 from Winnipeg. The team never reached the Stanley Cup Finals, but did make the Western Conference Finals in 2012.
So maybe you're asking, what does this have to do with us locally? Well, I'll tell you. For one, the Arizona Coyotes were the franchise that a lot of the NHL to Metro Atlanta backers were looking at for an easy slide in. Bring them here. It's not going to happen. They're going to Salt Lake City, Utah, hockey hotbed. Well, you know, Salt Lake City has supported the Utah Jazz for decades now, so I imagine there will be a base of support for a hockey team in Utah as well. Listen, laugh if you want, but Salt Lake City has been chomping at the bit to become a major league city for more than just basketball. And there was conversation about Salt Lake City being an alternate location for the Oakland A's franchise to move to instead of Vegas, and that didn't come to be. But Major League Baseball has Salt Lake City on its short list as well. Nonetheless, to me, in my mind, this sort of gives a little bit of an advantage to the Alpharetta contingent trying to build an arena versus the Forsyth County contingent trying to build the Gathering in Forsyth just over the Fulton County line. In fact, this story dropped March 12th of last month from ESPN.com's Greg Wyshynski. The Alpharetta Sports and Entertainment Group, fronted by former NHL player Anson Carter, has formally requested that the NHL commence with an expansion process aimed at bringing a franchise to the greater Atlanta area for a third time. So, as opposed to eyeing a relocating franchise, this group is looking for the NHL to add franchise or franchises to the league. Atlanta was previously home to the Flames in 1972-1980, who relocated to Calgary, and the Thrashers, who we all remember from 1999 to 2011, who eventually moved to Winnipeg, which is ironic because Winnipeg is the city that the Arizona Coyotes moved from to the Phoenix metro area before announcing that they're heading to Salt Lake City. Greg Wyshynski continues. The announcement published on Tuesday by Sportsnet states that the group is seeking an NHL team for a new arena designed by architect Frank Gehry that will be part of a larger development at the North Point Mall site in Alpharetta, located around 30 minutes from where the Thrashers used to play. Let me read a little bit more about this group here. Among the partners mentioned in the announcement are Neil Liebman of Top Tier Sports, Peter Simon of Simon Sports, Aaron Ziegler of Ziegler Automotive Group, and New York Life Real Estate Investors, who is a partner in the mixed-use land development. In a statement on Tuesday, NHL Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly said the league appreciated the enthusiasm from Carter's group. And by the way, Carter, among those, part owner of the ECHL's Atlanta Gladiators hockey team. He previously attempted to purchase the Atlanta Hawks, Thrashers, and their arena in 2011 with a group called Atlanta Sports and Entertainment, but they were declined by Atlanta Spirit, which then owned the teams. Listen, in my mind, this is the ownership group. This is the group that if we're going to have hockey in Metro Atlanta, this is the group that I think has the upper hand, which may put the kibosh on this gathering in Forsyth. If you'll recall, they're looking to build something along similar lines to the Battery in Cobb County, similarly just across the county line from Fulton, with no high-speed rail or any rail access whatsoever. No mass transit, I guess, is the point I'm trying to say. Alpharetta, obviously, in Fulton County still, and at least giving us in the metro the hope, the wish, the thought that perhaps we could get rail expansion from the North Springs station to this development in Alpharetta. One would like to hope, and one would be me, because I'm not driving all the way to Alpharetta to watch a hockey match. I'm just not. It's 400 is drive time. Can you imagine a 7 o'clock puck drop, and you've got to navigate 85 to Georgia 400 to go watch this? And then, of course, you got to do the whole like parking deck or parking lot, wait to get out, et cetera. I mean, it could be midnight, 12:30, 1 a.m. before you get back just to downtown Atlanta. Yeah, this is for my mind. If I'm going to put money on a horse, this is the horse I would want. Like I'm all for hockey coming back to Atlanta. By the way, can we have the Thrashers? Can we please have that back? I love the branding. But this is the one that I would like put my horse on, put my money on. The horse I would put my money on, because it just makes the most sense for the promise, anyway, of rail transit to and from this venue. And it's something that we need to insist on, honestly. Fulton County residents, Alpharetta residents, you would think Alpharetta residents who have probably long not wanted MARTA encroaching into their suburban enclave to start thinking long and hard about welcoming MARTA into that part of Fulton County. Because the crush of traffic, I mean, ask folks along the Battery. There aren't many that live along the Battery because there's a lot of retail around it. But man, the getting in and out and the parking, it's ugh. And Alpharetta is not any different than the rest of Metro Atlanta, already dealing with not enough road for the cars we have, and that's not going to get any better in the next decade and a half anyway. We're expecting, another 1.5 million residents here in the next 12 to 15 years. It's only going to get worse. So add an arena, 20,000 seat arena, and the mixed-use development all around it, and where are these cars going to sit? Where are they coming from? How are they getting in? How are they getting out? These are the conversations that need to be starting to be had now. And I'm not sure. I wasn't here when the Battery was first conceived. But and I know that the transit enthusiasts who lived here then, who live here now, were probably having this conversation. It obviously wasn't a loud enough conversation, but it's one that needs to be starting to be had right now if Alpharetta is going to be taken seriously. The frustrating part is that Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens is also the board chair for the Atlanta Regional Commission. And let me just read for you something that I shared yesterday on my Twitter X platform at Ron Show ATL. This, by the way, from Atlanta Urbanize. At the annual State of the Beltline address held last fall among a room full of real estate execs and other city power brokers, Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens spoke of Beltline transit like it was a foregone conclusion, a means of helping fight inequality, boost mobility, finish the Beltline's original vision. Every visual presented at that summit showed a future light rail system operating alongside Beltline patrons. But an interview the mayor gave the Atlanta News First broadcast station this week, suggesting that Beltline Rail's future might not be set in stone, is causing ripples. Dickens was discussing the future implementation of 4 new MARTA infill stations. He wants to see each transit stop finished in a reasonable amount of time, which means some activity between now and 2030, with the first likely being near Murphy Crossing. Dickens told the news station to complement Beltline mobility. Exactly what Beltline transit will look like, if any is implemented at all, will be determined by ongoing studies MARTA is conducting to see which transit mode best fits the Beltline and how the existing Atlanta streetcar can be improved. In September, the Beltline launched its own federally funded transit study for 14 miles of the loop, which is expected to take 2 years. Dickens' statement that's set rail proponents and urbanists on edge was this, according to the broadcast station. Once we come out with the results of the MARTA analysis, we'll make sure the public knows, and we can make a clear decision do we want it to be on rails? Do we want it to be on rubber tires? Do we want small pods, or do we want to leave this as a walking trail? I think by having it as right now with 4 infill stations, you're seeing connectivity coming to the Beltline. Now, how do we get people around the Beltline? Here, actually, let me just give you that piece from Patrick Quinn and WANF TV Atlanta News first so you can hear how this sort of played out on television.
Joy, thanks so much. Tonight, we are getting answers on the future of transit here in Atlanta.
The mayor announced these 4 MARTA rail stations coming to the Beltline Trail, but missing from that announcement is how the city will pay for it and when the stations will be up and running.
And today, Atlanta News First reporter Patrick Quinn took those questions back to the mayor. Patrick joins us now live from the future Murphy Crossing Station in Southwest Atlanta. So, Patrick, what'd you learn out there today?
Well, one of the biggest takeaways is don't expect any dirt to be turned over tomorrow. This is going to take some time. These 4 new MARTA stations, when talking with Beltline CEO Clyde Higgs, he said, we're looking more to get Atlanta ready for 2050, not 2025. Mayor Andre Dickens, he told me the timeline's a little faster than that. But for Dickens, you have to dream transit before it's delivered.
I'm super excited about the future of transit in Atlanta, the ability for us to be connected more.
4 new MARTA rail stations coming to Atlanta, all along the growing Beltline Trail. Dickens made the administrative order on Thursday. But in a one-on-one interview today, we pressed him on when exactly these stations will be running.
We want to get them all done in a reasonable amount of time. They take some time.
What's reasonable?
I want to see some activity between now and 2030. That's the hope.
Dickens said the first of these stops to get off the ground will be at Murphy Crossing in Southwest Atlanta. Beltline CEO Clyde Higgs said more than $1 billion in new development has already been infused in the growing West Side Trail.
We all hear about the high-flying opportunities with Ponce, with Krog. From our perspective, Murphy Crossing is going to be that next major redevelopment project along the Beltline.
So how is the city going to pay for these stations? What MARTA has approximated will cost at a minimum $400 million. Dickens said they'll rely on the More MARTA half-penny sales tax, approved by Atlanta voters in 2016, and leverage private dollars.
How Atlanta has done stations in the past is the past.
Dickens said these marquee stations will include housing, retail, and amenities like daycare and dry cleaning.
So when you build it that way, you're not just building rail, you're also building a community at the same time, and that's how you get the private sector involved so developers can help us with that.
And back here live from Murphy Crossing, again, this is going to be the first of those 4 stations to be propped up. One of the biggest questions still outstanding from that announcement, what about streetcar along the Beltline? Well, Dickens, he would not give his stance on it, neither would Clyde Higgs, who you just heard from. However, they said there right now is an environmental review, a study going on. They want to see the data, the results of that, before they decide if streetcar along the Beltline is indeed the right choice. We're live tonight from Murphy Crossing. Patrick Quinn, Atlanta News First.
So I go back to the Alpharetta situation and Mayor Dickens, also chair of the Atlanta Regional Commission, and I'm just left wondering, like, even if we can get a commitment from him now to start talking about MARTA expansion into or from North Springs up to Roswell and then to Alpharetta, where this proposed new development at the North Point Mall would spring up from. I mean, how do we know that he's going to stay true to that? Because he's waffled on the Beltline rail. Anyway, as you know, that's a story we'll continue watching here on The Ron Show. Back in just a few here on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, or wherever you podcast. Follow the show on the Twitter X platform or Instagram or Facebook. That would be at Ron Show ATL. So you can stay on top of whatever it is that I'm covering, or I guess on Instagram if I just found a funny political meme. Jim Dennery at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution drops this article that cites why we're seeing so many fall from the Medicaid rolls here in the state of Georgia. 600,000 Georgians have lost Medicaid. Meanwhile, the governor is on record. He is against Medicaid expansion, even if it comes up next legislative session. We'll get to that story in just a little bit. Jim Dennery writing, nearly 600,000 Georgians have lost their Medicaid coverage, and more are likely to join them with a few months still to go in the process of requalifying recipients. Missing paperwork cited in the cases of 504,000 Georgians now lacking coverage under the state federal health insurance program for poor children and some poor adults. Georgia, at 84%, is among the 10 states that saw the largest share of recipients who lost coverage because of missing paperwork, according to the health research organization KFF. The requalifying of recipients came after the 3-year public health emergency in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Over that time, no one on Medicaid was required to update the paperwork to show they still qualified. As a result, Georgia's Medicaid rolls grew to cover 2.8 million people, about a quarter of the state's population. The federal government last year asked all states to recertify Medicaid recipients and drop those who no longer qualify or who didn't complete the required paperwork. States were given more than a year to do the work, and that deadline is looming. But the task was so big that on January 1st, the federal government ordered states to pause the disenrollment of children and to concentrate instead on adults. As of 2019, 56% of Georgia Medicaid enrollees were aged 18 or under, according to KFF. Advocates for patients say the system is complicated and glitchy. Attorneys say they have seen the state lose paperwork they know was sent. State Department of Community Health spokesman Fiona Roberts said some Georgians have obtained other insurance and never reapplied for Medicaid. Roberts couldn't provide an exact number, but she pointed to KFF data showing that since Medicaid reevaluations began last year, 276,000 Georgians who at some time in their lives had Medicaid have now obtained private health insurance through the Affordable Care Act. And then this from the Politically Georgia folks. Governor Brian Kemp did a live Politically Georgia event yesterday, as a matter of fact, and I guess it's airing this morning, maybe a little bit later. Greg Bluestein reporting just minutes ago, this dropping. Governor Brian Kemp said he opposed an effort to expand Medicaid next year, even as a growing number of Republicans say they're open to a debate on allowing Georgia to join the 40 other states that have boosted their programs for low-income residents. The governor told Politically Georgia during a live event Thursday that he's concerned that expansion will, quote, increase your short-term costs and your long-term costs by shifting hundreds of thousands of people from private sector insurance to Medicaid. That's just not good policy. He says, it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. I'm in the no camp. I'm supportive of what we did. We need some more time to continue to implement and get people to sign up on Pathways. He referenced the Georgia Pathways to Coverage program, which Greg Bluestein writes, expanded Medicaid eligibility for poor people who work at least 80 hours per month or meet academic or other requirements. He continued, Kemp did. My position is to continue on the policies that the General Assembly voted on in a bipartisan way early in my administration, and the Biden administration has tried to block. Bluestein continues, the Pathways program has drawn tepid interest with about 3,500 uninsured applicants through March out of an estimated 370,000 who are eligible. That's less than 1%, y'all. It has cost taxpayers at least $26 million, with more than 90% going to administrative and consulting costs. It's just ironic. The governor talks about short-term costs, et cetera. And here we're looking at the short-term cost of adding a mere 3,500 to the Georgia Pathways program, less than 1% of those eligible, for $26 million. Representative Dr. Michelle Au was on the Politically Georgia podcast yesterday and was asked a host of questions about abortion and IVF and Medicaid expansion. Here's Patricia Murphy.
Representative, along with conversations about IVF down at the General Assembly, there was what we thought would be more extensive conversation about expanding Medicaid here in the state. It did get a little bit of a last-minute sort of chat in a Senate committee with a vote, but the vote did not go forward. What do you think right now is the state of both Medicaid and just simple coverage here in the state? How many Georgians still need to be covered by insurance before you would feel comfortable right now?
So look, Georgia has the third highest uninsurance rate in the nation, right? Those are the facts. That is the data. That is not a good number. Right? That is not a good cohort to be in, right? So that is really something we're going to need to look at. I don't think that there's anyone who's at the state capitol that doesn't know that at some point we are going to have to expand Medicaid, right? We are one of only 9 states remaining that has not. Most other states, even in our area, are following suit because they realize that this is a fiscally responsible and ethically, morally imperative choice. Having put it off yet another year is yet another nod to the political reality of the state in that Governor Kemp has passed a Medicaid waiver plan, which is much more, I will say, politely modest and underperforming in terms of its ability to cover the huge number of uninsured patients in our state that could qualify for Medicaid. And I just don't know, honestly, just purely from a political standpoint, since we're talking about this, how much more this administration can tolerate all the bad news stories that roll out literally every 1, 2, and 3 weeks about how poorly we are doing in covering the patients in our state, right? At some point, the political calculus of campaigning on a bespoke Medicaid limited expansion plan under the Kemp administration gets overshadowed by the fact that it is simply not working, right? So I hope that as we move into the next session, I've been given assurances that we will continue this conversation, but waiting yet another year for healthcare is something that a lot of patients cannot afford, and frankly, something that our state cannot afford.
But remember, Governor Brian Kemp is fiscally responsible and pro-life. This is The Ron Show. Back after this.
This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
So I've been a lot less shy about talking about real estate. I am a residential real estate agent, a realtor here in Metro Atlanta, after all. At Ron on the Real. If you want to find me on social media or at rononthereal.com. If you'd like to reach out to me or explore listings, maybe you're relocating to Metro Atlanta, happy to help you with that. A piece that is part of an overarching series of investigations that the Atlanta Journal-Constitution has been doing dropped about 9 days ago. Matt Reynolds at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution filing this story. Georgia, headline, ranked as most at risk from Wall Street investment in housing. I call them iBuyers, institutional buyers. And iBuyers are these faceless corporate entities that are out there buying up houses along with, Tom and Jane and their 2 kids and their dog. They're out there competing to buy the same house that the starter family is looking to buy as well. And I can tell you from 2020 to 2022, they were very much a part of the surge in home prices, well above appraised value. In fact, it was almost one of those scenarios where because the home values were increasing at such a rapid pace, the appraisers were actually sort of adjusting and appraising homes at what was weeks ago or months before, a crazy notion for what a house would be worth. Anyway, Matt Reynolds writes this piece, and I'm going to go through it, skim through it here a little bit, and give you some nuggets along the way here. The Peach State is no stranger to institutional investment in housing, iBuyers, with many arguing it narrows the playing field for low and middle income buyers and makes the American dream of home ownership more difficult. It was an issue brought into stark relief in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution's investigative series, American Dream for Rent, which called Greater Atlanta ground zero for corporate investment in housing. Can I just tell you, by the way, as a real estate agent, as a realtor, we have programs. I can tell you that we have programs available to us to help folks who are looking to buy a home, but maybe not quite sure or just not quite qualified. You got to have that 620 credit, somewhere in that realm. There are those who may have a 585 credit, 550 credit, and they want to buy, they just can't buy. They're not in position to buy. And there are programs that exist for folks just like that who may fall in love with a house that's for sale, but it's for sale. I can't rent it. Home Partners of America is a company I've worked with. Divvy Homes as well. Landis comes to mind as well, although I've not worked with them. I'm not super familiar with how they work. These, I guess, count as institutional buyers because what they do is, and I did this with 4 homes last year. Home Partners, for example, will buy the house for a prospective tenant who saw the house, realized it qualified for Home Partners to purchase. Home Partners purchases it with the intent of leasing it out to that tenant because they've agreed, they've signed paperwork saying that that's what they're going to do. And then that tenant or that tenant family has a period of time, can be anywhere from 3 to 5 years, to not only lease the house, but have the option, the first right of refusal to buy the house. Now, here's the rub. The house, say it's purchased for $300,000, and that family or that tenant decides, well, yeah, I'd like to buy it 2 years later. Well, that house ain't $300,000 2 years later. It has built-in price increases. Now, some of these lease-owned programs, and I'm not poo-pooing these programs. I think in some respects they're kind of good, but these programs sometimes build in scenarios where what you're paying in rent, they actually take some of the excess and put it to the side so that you have that down payment. Oh yeah, you got to have the down payment too. And in most cases, you have to put at least 1 to sometimes 2% down in order for them to buy and then lease the home to you. So some of the institutional buyers could be counted amongst the lease purchase programs. And then at some point in time, it's, read the fine print. If you're going to go this route as a tenant with an intent to buy down the road, you've got to make sure that you're reading the fine print so that you know what you're getting yourself into. The cost of a house in Atlanta goes up. I mean, we saw from 2010 to 2020, I think it was like 139% increase in value just on average. So you have to expect that there's going to be an increase in value even in just a 2 to 3 year span, or sometimes 5 years. You have that opportunity. Anyway, just thought I'd let you know where some of the institutional buying is, and then there are others that are just buying up houses. these iBuyers, and the limitations are minimal, if at all, at the state, at the county, or local level. Your homeowners association actually may be doing more to fight institutional buyers than any other entity. We all hate HOAs, but let's give them some credit for that. Where they have rent caps. Could be 75%, 80% of the homeowners association's neighborhood have to be owned by the person living in the house. That's a good thing, right? Okay, anyway, back to this article. A new analysis by the Wall Street watchdog, the Private Equity Stakeholder Project, published Tuesday, this was Tuesday in early April, compounded those findings, ranking Georgia as the most at-risk state in the nation for market disruptions, rental increases, and unsafe conditions from private equity investment in housing. The analysis gave Georgia the highest possible private equity risk score of 100 in its housing category, finding that from 2018 to 2022, about 17% of homes in the state were purchased by medium, large, or mega investors, a more than 62% change over the same period. The group relied on data from CoreLogic and research from the Pew Charitable Trust to reach its housing scores. Jordan Ash, housing director for the nonprofit, said private equity interest means many U.S. consumers are being squeezed out of the market for new homes, a finding that mirrors the AJC investigation that analyzed tax assessor data across 11 metro Atlanta counties to identify every home purchased by investors that own more than 50 houses. The article continues, institutional investment increases the likelihood of rent increases and poorly maintained homes, according to Ash. Ash said corporate buyers were taking advantage of technology to swoop in and make all-cash offers for homes as soon as they hit the market, giving them an obvious advantage over the average consumer, another parallel finding to the AJC series. Now, let me say this. Let me go back to the lease purchase programs like Home Partners and Divvy and Landis. They're usually not going to offer at or above asking price. That's been my experience. They almost never offer at or above asking price. You have to hit the sweet spot. It's like a Goldilocks scenario. It's got to be just right. You got to find a house that meets their conditions. Like, they want homes that are in fantastic shape. I'll give, in fact, Home Partners, I'm going to give them a tip of the cap here, where the fear is some of these institutional buyers rent out and don't maintain. I can tell you, I walked through a home with a potential Home Partners client. This is funny. This is where the iBuyer doesn't know what the iBuyer is doing. We walked through a house with this potential tenant, and I'm working on behalf of Home Partners here to help them find a house that Home Partners will buy for them and then turn around and rent to them. We're walking through the house and we're like, wow, this is perfect. There's no way Home Partners would thumb their nose at this. It's absolutely perfect. Come to find out, the home was actually owned by Home Partners LLC. They were actually turning around and selling it in a subdivision that they'd already approved for purchase. They're looking to unload some of their properties now, and no idea why. It could be that they're just looking to maybe divest a little bit. Maybe they're reading the tea leaves and seeing that that this is a bit of I don't know. I don't know why Home Partners decided to sell that house, but obviously, since they're selling the house, they don't want to lease it out, so it was not available to my client. Anyway, the point being, Home Partners actually takes care of their homes. And they want to buy nice homes to rent out to people. The clientele tends to be a little bit, higher brow, and they may only be living in Metro Atlanta, say, for example, for, 3 to 5 years. They're not sure they want to buy a house, but they don't want to rent a house that's not very well taken care of. And I hate to speak in generalisms, but in general, whether it's, someone in the neighborhood who owns a house and is renting it out for income property, a rental income, or it's an LLC that owns a few houses, or a medium or larger company that owns a lot of houses who just churn through tenants, they're not really doing all that much to keep a house in tip-top shape. And the tenants are doing even less. Again, in general, some tenants are really good in the homes that they're renting out and actually, do the maintenance themselves or get reimbursed for it. But in general, these homes come out in far worse shape in 3 to 5 years. And then they land back on the market, and Tom and Jane and their kid and the dog are maybe looking to buy a lesser product that they would have loved to have been able to snap up back when the home was in great shape. And this is the thing. Here's why the institutional buyers, the iBuyers, do this. They know in a market like Atlanta that home values increase, right? Equity. They build up that equity in the time that they own the home, and also rent it for a profit. So they get the best of both worlds, and then they turn around and sell it and cash in that equity. I mean, it's a great investment. This is why this is why as a real estate agent, I tell people all the time, yes, it's smarter to buy than to rent. I mean, we can sit here and talk about how, rent has actually, the increase has actually slowed, or in some cases it's cheaper to rent than to buy. Well, sure, but rent is 100% interest. Owning a home right now, mortgage rates are hovering in the mid to high 7s. That's the interest rate you're paying. And we talked a little bit about this yesterday when we were reading the email from my mortgage lender friend, Randy, who said, you marry the mortgage, you date the rate. He's absolutely right. The rate is a temporary problem, but the mortgage is the permanent solution, and the equity growth that comes with that. That's the investment you make. If the institutional buyers, the iBuyers, know this, then the average American consumer should as well. And I remember when everybody was just going full frenzy, trying to buy houses when rates were in the 2s and 3s, a lot of the reason that the home values went crazy was because some of these institutional buyers were snapping up what was affordable, and it drove people to higher priced product. And because the competition was so much more intense for the higher priced product, that home value got even higher priced. And we just found ourselves with a lot of folks locked out, weren't able to, be a part of that glory period of low interest rates. Ash continued in the article here. You can't compete with the business model as an individual, adding that the problem is not unique to Georgia. Housing has become viewed as an investment rather than as meeting people's basic needs. The impact has been to drive housing prices up everywhere. Those in the hunt for a home in the U.S., get this, need to make $114,000 a year to buy the typical house, according to a recent analysis by national real estate brokerage site Redfin. That is 35% more than the median household income of $84,000. According to the most recent Zillow rental market data, the median rent in Atlanta is $2,075, slightly lower than the national median of $2,092. Earlier this year, the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies released a report finding that almost half of all renters are paying more than 30% of their income towards rent and utilities. Continuing this article in the AJC, David Howard, Chief Executive Officer of the Trade Association, the National Rental Home Council, so his bias is baked in, pushed back against the private equity stakeholder project's analysis. He argued there was little evidence private equity investment had disrupted the housing market in the state, noting that the home ownership rate is higher now in Metro Atlanta's 5 counties than it was 5 years ago. Okay, David, but are you a real estate agent? Are you on the ground? Are you actually working with buyers who are looking through these houses and finding that the competition is steeper because of the 17%, was it, of all buyers? The impact, I mean, that's like nearly 1 in 5 that these, 1 in 6 just about, have on the market. Regarding rents, market data shows it's about $1,000 less expensive to rent than own a single-family home, Howard said, citing June 2023 data from the firm John Burns Research and Consulting. Okay, that's all fine and well, but again, rent is 100% interest. That is money a renter will never see again. Taylor Shelton, an assistant professor in the Department of Geosciences at Georgia State, co-authored a recent study finding the company's Invitation Homes premium partners and Amherst have a stake in almost 11% of single-family rental homes in 5 metro Atlanta counties, including Fulton, Clayton, DeKalb, Gwinnett, and Cobb. He said that institutional investors are not wholly to blame for conditions in the housing market, not by any stretch of the imagination. He argued, however, that institutional investment had made a bad situation worse. The biggest issue that faces the housing market is that we treat it as a market for a commodity, not as a human right or a public good. These companies are undoubtedly major contributors to that dynamic. So how do we fix this? Well, this article pivots. The Private Equity Stakeholder Project proposed several policy solutions, including laws barring landlords from evicting tenants unless they have good cause, an annual cap on rents in line with inflation, a first right of refusal for tenants to purchase homes they rent, and a landlord registry that identifies corporate landlords that have multiple holdings. Housing was one of 4 categories the watchdog looked at as it ranked states. It assessed the risk to state workers and jobs, health care, and pensions, finding New Mexico is at the greatest risk overall from private equity. Georgia ranked 6th with an overall risk score of 86. According to the group, the score represents a very high risk. Here's a quote. By providing transparent data on the risks associated with private equity investments, we empower communities, working families, and policymakers to advocate for changes and protect their states from the threats posed by unchecked private equity firms. That's Chris Noble, policy director at the nonprofit. He continues, this is an important step towards mitigating the risks and tangible harms wrought by private equity across the country. Obviously, we'll include this article in today's show notes at ronshowatl.com. And if you have any questions about any of this, again, I'm a residential real estate agent, a realtor, and I have lots of mortgage lending friends that can answer questions as well. Don't hesitate to hit me up, 404-919-2725 at ronshowatl on any of your preferred social media platforms. Back after this. In the home stretch here, thank you for listening to The Ron Show, whether it's just this morning or all this week or last 16 so months. Man, fantastic. Appreciate that. Follow us at Ron Show ATL, Facebook, the Twitter X platform, Instagram, ronshowatl.com for any past shows that you want to listen to, or, of course, on any of your podcast platforms. They're all there. There's also a donate tab at ronshowatl.com if you'd like to kind of help keep the show together. Now, if you listen on the American One Radio app, AmericanOneRadio.com, you hear commercials from the station, not from me. I don't do a whole lot of that. I'd like to give you guys at least 44 and a half minutes weekday content, and one way to help defray the cost of keeping this show together is maybe by, I don't know, dropping me what it costs to buy a Starbucks coffee. You do what you will. Appreciate that. At ronshowatl.com. Rose DeLauro, she doesn't get the clickbait that the Jared Moskowitz or the Jasmine Crockett's do, but man, when she gets the mic in the house, whew, she's sharp. Representing the 3rd District from Connecticut, 81-year-old Rose DeLauro has had enough of the BS in the House. And by the way, can we just talk about how House Speaker Mike Johnson catching a lot of fire within his own party for finally coming to the table and discussing and putting to a vote aid for Ukraine. People want to give him credit for, that's just so noble of him, so bipartisan that he's doing this. He's been sitting on this for months. I don't want to give him any credit for this. Is it doing the right thing? Yes, it's doing the right thing about 3 to 4 months too late. And how many Ukrainian lives have been lost because of his diddling and his dithering? Rose DeLauro gave him hell yesterday. Listen to this.
Border security. I sat in the White House, not in a classified meeting, where Republican colleagues said that we won't have Ukraine without bipartisan border security. And then you know what? We accomplished bipartisan border security. It wasn't, and it was, you can shake your head all you want, but Democrats and Republicans voted for border security. And you know what? It was Donald Trump who said, don't give Biden a win. You think about that. Put that aside. This moment is now. The United States Senate, you can have all the views you want about the United States Senate, but hold them for this debate. It is now. It is about the United States House of Representatives. We have the opportunity to do what we do here, and that is to govern. And what are we doing in governing? Is to be a world leader. And for months and months, we have been diddling around where people are dying in Ukraine. Don't talk about what weapons we want to give them. We're not giving them what they need now, and it has been months in the coming. And we ought to today, immediately, we should have picked up that Senate bill, brought it to the floor, and voted on it immediately, and we would be out of here today in doing it. Let us not rewrite what is happening. The moment is ours. And if the House of Representatives abdicates its responsibility, yes, the history will write the story, and that it is on us. When we had that moment, we said no. I, for one, will not say no.
And then you got clowns like Josh Hawley, Senator Josh Hawley, who was on Laura Ingraham here recently this week, saying stuff like this.
We don't have any idea whether any of these disruptions are in any way connected, related, but how does this show how vulnerable some of our critical infrastructure really is here?
Well, incredibly vulnerable. I'll just say this, Laura. It just strikes me that more and more, nothing really works in America anymore. I mean, our roads are falling apart. Our bridges are falling down right in front of our eyes. Pieces of airplanes are falling out of the sky. Now we've got these outages. And yet, at the same time, the Congress of the United States and the president, what do they want to do? Spend hundreds of billions of dollars more on foreign wars.
I mean, I suppose this is where I point out that Josh Hawley was among the 30 Republicans who voted against infrastructure when the infrastructure bill passed in 2021. He was on with Laura Ingraham to discuss some rogue 9/11 outages in a few areas throughout the country. And listen, we should have a discussion about investing in preventing hackings and spyware and stuff like that. Absolutely. But we also needed to do that with the IRS. And Josh Hawley, of course, and Laura Ingraham and Republicans are steadfastly against that sort of investment either. And I'm sorry, like, we're going to talk about bridges crumbling just a couple of weeks after a large barge boat ran into a bridge. That's not the same, Senator. That's not the same. Stop conflating. I'm talking to chief conflators in this country. Well, who am I to tell him to stop being that, I guess? Representative DeLauro's point, and the point that I'm trying to make here, is that Republicans are literally the meme of the kid riding the bike with the stick that they're poking into the front wheel there, and then in the next frame, they're found on the ground having fallen over because someone put a stick in the wheel and stopped the bike from spinning. Yes, they create the problems that they complain about, and then run on fixing the problems while also cutting taxes, cutting government services, scaling back the size of government. But then that's what causes the problems they turn around and complain about when they're not in complete charge. Now, Speaker Johnson claims that he, I guess, evolved, you don't want to say flip-flopped in this political environment on the Ukraine aid because of fresh intelligence, which described the country at a true make-or-break moment in its war with Russia. So that's what he's saying, that now's the time to do the right thing. I'm sorry, it's not as if we didn't know all along that we were backing David in a David versus Goliath situation, and that any crimping in the hose of support was going to create a problem for the smaller country we were backing. I just don't understand why this is suddenly. And listen, I'm grateful. Listen, I want Ukraine to come out on top here. I don't understand why only now, all of a sudden, Speaker Johnson decides that this is something to deal with. And by the way, they got to deal with it today because apparently Congress is supposed to be in recess next week, unless they decide not to do that. It's just interesting that now, all of a sudden, he sees a dire need. I'm not ready to give him credit for this, but let's get the bill passed and see anyway. That's going to do it for The Ron Show. Obviously, it was a great weekend. We'll be back here Monday night at 10 a.m. on the American One Radio app, AmericanOneRadio.com, all day on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com, or wherever you podcast when you follow The Ron Show. Show notes at ronshowatl.com. See you next time.